The dust-laden wind carried the scent of betrayal as Beatrice Ellington stood on the porch of a house that never felt like home, her wedding ring heavy as a shackle on her finger. The year was 1878, and the Montana Territory stretched before her like an endless prison of rolling hills and big sky that once promised freedom but now only reminded her of everything she'd lost. "You're mighty quiet today, Mrs. Rollins," said her husband's ranch hand, tipping his hat as he passed. Beatrice didn't respond. Thomas Rollins, 20 years her senior and the wealthiest rancher in the county, had married her 3 months ago after her father's death left her penniless with a parcel of prime grazing land as her only inheritance. The marriage had been his idea, her salvation, he'd called it. Now she understood it had been a business transaction, nothing more. "The north pasture needs clearing," Thomas said as he emerged from the house, pulling on his gloves. "Should fetch a fine price once we add it to the main property. My father's favorite fishing spot is on that land," Beatrice said quietly. "I used to go there with him every Sunday after church." Thomas barely glanced at her. "Well, it's Rollins' land now. Best put those memories to rest." He mounted his horse and rode off without another word, the dust from his departure settling on her blue calico dress. Alone again, Beatrice let her tears fall freely. At 22, she felt her life was already over before it had truly begun. 2 days later, Beatrice rode to town in the wagon, a list of supplies clutched in her hand. Millicent, the housekeeper, had insisted someone accompany her, but Beatrice had been firm. These solitary trips were her only taste of freedom. Jameson's general store was busy when she arrived. She waited patiently as Mr. Jameson attended to other customers, including a tall man she didn't recognize. His broad shoulders were dusted with trail dirt, and the worn leather chaps and sun-faded shirt marked him as a working cowboy, not one of the dandies who occasionally passed through town. When he turned, his eyes met hers startlingly blue against his tanned face. "Madam," he said with a slight nod, his voice deep and smooth like aged whiskey. "Sir," she replied, the formality feeling strange in her mouth. Mr. Jameson finished with the cowboy's purchases, and the stranger gathered his supplies. As he passed her, he paused. "You dropped this," he said, bending to retrieve the handkerchief that had fallen from her reticule. Their fingers brushed as she took it from him, and Beatrice felt a jolt that startled her so thoroughly she stepped back. "Thank you, Mr. Samuel Archer, madam. Just arrived to work at the Morgan place." "Beatrice Rollins," she replied, noticing how his expression changed slightly at her surname. "Mrs. Rollins," he acknowledged, and she didn't correct his assumption. "Good day to you." After completing her purchases, Beatrice stepped out into the afternoon sun to find Samuel Archer loading his supplies onto a sturdy buckskin gelding. "That's a fine horse," she remarked, surprised at her own boldness. Samuel patted the horse's neck. "Cop has been with me through 3 states and more trouble than I care to admit." "You're new to these parts?" "Yes, madam. Signed on with Morgan last week. Been needing a fresh start." His eyes crinkled when he smiled, lines etched by sun and wind. "Montana's good for fresh starts, I'm told," she said, though her own experience suggested otherwise. "That your wagon?" he asked, nodding toward her rig. Beatrice nodded, suddenly aware of how heavy her purchases were. "Allow me," he said, lifting her parcels with ease and carrying them to her wagon. "You're very kind, Mr. Archer. Just Samuel, please. And it's no trouble." He secured the last bundle and stepped back. "Will you be all right driving back alone?" "I've managed thus far," she replied, a hint of defiance in her voice. Something in his expression told her he understood more than she'd said. Still, the roads can be treacherous. The Blackfoot Creek crossing is running high with the spring melt. "I'll take care," she promised, climbing onto the seat. Samuel hesitated, then said, "I ride past Rollins' land on my way to Morgan's. I'd be happy to accompany you part way." Beatrice should have declined, but the thought of conversation with someone who didn't see her merely as Thomas Rollins' wife was too tempting. "I would appreciate that, Samuel." They traveled side by side, the conversation flowing more easily than Beatrice had experienced in months. Samuel spoke of his travels across the Western Territories, working cattle drives from Texas to Montana. "What brought you to stay?" she asked. Samuel's expression grew thoughtful. A man reaches a point where he wants more than just the next horizon. I'm 30 years old, Mrs. Rollins. Time to put down some roots. Beatrice, she corrected him. Beatrice, he repeated, her name sounding different in his mouth, like something precious. They parted at the edge of Rollins' property, and Beatrice watched him ride away with an unfamiliar ache in her chest. Only when he disappeared from view did she notice a small package had been placed among her supplies, wrapped in brown paper with her name scratched on it. Inside was a beautifully carved wooden hummingbird. The craftsmanship was exquisite, capturing the delicate creature in mid-flight. No note accompanied it, but she knew it was from him. For the first time in months, Beatrice smiled a genuine smile. The following weeks brought more chance encounters with Samuel. She saw him at church, where he sat quietly in the back pew. She passed him on the road to town and at the community barn raising for the Wilsons, whose home had burned in an electrical storm. Each time, they exchanged only a few words, but Beatrice found herself seeking his face in every crowd, storing each brief conversation like treasures. One warm afternoon in late May, Beatrice was gathering wildflowers near Blackfoot Creek when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Samuel riding toward her, leading a second horse. Mrs. Rollins, he called, dismounting when he reached her. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, she replied, clutching her basket of flowers. And please, I've asked you to call me Beatrice. Beatrice, he said with a smile that reached his eyes. I was riding fence for Morgan and saw you from the ridge. Thought you might like to see something. See what? She asked, curiosity piqued. There's an eagle's nest in the high canyon. The chicks just hatched. He gestured to the second horse. I borrowed Morgan's mare for you, if you'd care to ride out and see them. Propriety dictated she decline, but Beatrice found herself nodding. I'd like that very much. The ride to the canyon was exhilarating. Beatrice hadn't been on horseback in months. Thomas considered it unladylike for his wife to ride astride, and she reveled in the freedom of it, the wind loosening tendrils of her dark hair from its pins. Samuel led her up a narrow trail to a lookout point where, true to his word, an eagle's nest was visible on a rocky outcropping. Through his field glasses, Beatrice could see the mother eagle feeding her chicks. They're magnificent, she breathed. They mate for life, Samuel said, standing close beside her. Once an eagle finds its partner, they stay together until death. Beatrice lowered the glasses. A rare quality in this world. Not so rare, Samuel countered. Just requires the right hearts finding each other. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Beatrice was the first to look away, her heart pounding. I should return, she said. Thomas will be expecting me. Samuel nodded, his expression carefully neutral as he helped her mount. They rode back mostly in silence, the weight of what remained unsaid hanging between them. At the edge of the meadow where they'd met, Samuel finally spoke. Beatrice, I don't mean to pry, but are you happy? The question, so simple and yet so complex, caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. Happiness wasn't part of the arrangement, she found herself answering. What arrangement? Beatrice hesitated, then the words tumbled out. My father died last year. The bank was going to take everything. Thomas offered marriage and financial security. I had nowhere else to go. Samuel's jaw tightened. So he married you for your land. That's the way of things, isn't it? Men like Thomas build empires acre by acre. She tried to sound matter of fact, but her voice betrayed her bitterness. No, Beatrice, that's not the way it should be. His voice was gentle but firm. Marriage should be about love, not land. Love is a luxury for people who have choices, she replied, the words hollow even to her own ears. Samuel reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. Everyone deserves choices, Beatrice. Everyone deserves love. His touch was warm, calloused from hard work, and Beatrice allowed herself to hold on for just a moment before pulling away. Thank you for showing me the eagles, she said, gathering her reins. I should go now. Beatrice, he called as she turned to leave. Will you be at the Independence Day celebration next week? Yes. Thomas never misses an opportunity to be seen in town. Then I'll see you there, Samuel said, a promise in his voice that made her heart flutter treacherously. Beatrice spent the week leading up to the 4th of July in a state of nervous anticipation. She took special care with her appearance on the morning of the celebration, selecting her best dress, a cornflower blue that matched her eyes, and arranging her hair in an elegant style that had gone out of fashion in the East, but was still considered the height of sophistication in Montana territory. Thomas barely glanced at her as they rode into town in the buggy, too preoccupied with discussing cattle prices with his foreman, who rode alongside. The town square was decorated with bunting and flags, and a band played patriotic tunes from a hastily constructed platform. "I'll be at the men's club," Thomas told her after they'd made a circuit of the square, greeting the local dignitaries. "The ladies' auxiliary has set up refreshments by the church. You can wait for me there." Beatrice nodded dutifully, watching him stride away with the other ranchers and businessmen. Once he was out of sight, she wandered through the celebration, admiring the children's games and the displays of homemade preserves and needlework. "You look like you could use some lemonade." The voice behind her made her heart skip. Samuel stood there holding 2 glasses, looking more polished than she'd ever seen him in a clean white shirt and dark vest. "Thank you," she said, accepting the drink. "You clean up well, Mr. Archer." "As do you, Mrs. Rollins." His eyes lingered on her face, and Beatrice felt herself blushing. They found a spot under a large cottonwood tree, slightly removed from the main crowd. For an hour, they talked of inconsequential things: the unusually wet spring, the upcoming county fair, the quality of the band's music, all while an undercurrent of something deeper flowed between them. "Dance with me," Samuel said suddenly as the band struck up a waltz. "I shouldn't," Beatrice protested weakly, even as she longed to accept. "Just one dance," he insisted, offering his hand. "It's a celebration, after all." Against her better judgment, Beatrice allowed him to lead her to the edge of the dancing area. His hand at her waist was respectful, keeping a proper distance between them, but she could feel the strength in his touch, the gentle pressure of his fingers against hers. "You dance well for a cowboy," she teased as he guided her expertly through the steps. "My mother insisted I learn," said a man who can dance would never lack for female company. His smile was self-deprecating. "Though I haven't had much opportunity to practice in cow camps and mining towns." Well, she was right, Beatrice said, then blushed at her own boldness. They completed the dance in silence, the connection between them speaking louder than words. As the music ended, Samuel reluctantly released her, his fingers lingering against hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Beatrice." Thomas's sharp voice cut through the moment like a knife. "What are you doing?" Beatrice turned to see her husband approaching, his face flushed with anger or alcohol, perhaps both. "Just enjoying the dance, Mr. Rollins," Samuel said smoothly, tipping his hat. "Your wife was kind enough to partner with me." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "You're Morgan's new hand, aren't you?" "Archer, is it?" "Yes, sir. Samuel Archer." "Well, Mr. Archer, I suggest you find a dance partner more appropriate to your station." Thomas took Beatrice's arm possessively. "My wife has social obligations to attend to." "Of course," Samuel replied, his voice tight but controlled. "Thank you for the dance, Mrs. Rollins." Beatrice watched helplessly as he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Thomas steered her toward a group of ranchers' wives, his grip painfully tight on her arm. "What were you thinking?" he hissed. "Making a spectacle of yourself with a common cowhand." "It was just a dance, Thomas," she replied, keeping her voice low. "Everyone is dancing today." "Everyone is not my wife," he snapped. "I won't have people talking. Your behavior reflects on me." The remainder of the celebration passed in miserable tedium for Beatrice. Thomas kept her at his side as he made his rounds, showing off his pretty young wife like another possession he'd acquired, another symbol of his success. It was nearly dusk when they finally prepared to leave. As Thomas went to fetch the buggy, Beatrice found herself momentarily alone near the church steps. A hand touched her elbow, and she turned to find Samuel standing in the shadows. "I'm sorry if I caused trouble for you," he said quietly. "No, I'm sorry." Thomas can be particular about appearances. Samuel's expression darkened. "Is that all? Just appearances?" Beatrice couldn't meet his eyes. "Please, Samuel. It's better if we don't." "Don't what?" "Talk. Be friends." He stepped closer. "Beatrice, I can't stop thinking about you. Ever since that day in town." "Please," she whispered, her resolve weakening with each word. "I'm married. To a man who sees you as property," Samuel said, his voice urgent. "A man who married you for your land, not for love." The painful truth of his words struck Beatrice like a physical blow. What would you have me do? I made vows. Vows based on a lie aren't binding in the eyes of God or man, Samuel argued. You deserve better. You deserve to be cherished, not owned. Samuel, she began, but the sound of approaching footsteps silenced her. Meet me, he said quickly. Tomorrow, at the Eagle's Nest. Noon. Before she could respond, he was gone, melting into the gathering darkness as Thomas rounded the corner with their buggy. That night, Beatrice lay awake in her bedroom, separate from Thomas's by mutual, unspoken agreement torn between duty and desire. The proper course was clear. She should stay away, honor her marriage vows, accept her lot in life. But Samuel's words echoed in her mind, along with the memory of his hand in hers as they danced. By dawn, she'd made her decision. Telling Thomas she was visiting the widow Jensen, who lived on a neighboring property, Beatrice rode out at mid-morning. She wore her riding habit and had packed a small bundle of food, her heart pounding with the recklessness of her actions. Samuel was already waiting when she reached their meeting place, seated on a rock outcropping with copper grazing nearby. He stood as she approached, his face lighting up. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. I shouldn't have, she replied, dismounting. This is madness, Samuel. Is it madness to follow your heart? He asked, taking her hands in his. Beatrice, I've known you only a short while, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my entire life. The raw honesty in his words broke something loose inside her. I feel it too, she admitted. But that doesn't change our circumstances. I'm bound to Thomas. Tell me the truth, Samuel said. Does he love you? Does he treat you with kindness and respect? Does he see you for the remarkable woman you are? Tears filled Beatrice's eyes. You know he doesn't. Then why stay? Where would I go? What would I do? A woman alone in this territory. She shook her head. Thomas may not love me, but he provides security, respectability. Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I've been saving to buy land of my own. I've almost got enough. He opened the document to reveal a land claim. There's a parcel up north, near the Canadian border. Good water, plenty of timber, room to raise cattle, and a family. Beatrice stared at the paper, understanding what he was proposing. Samuel, you can't possibly want to saddle yourself with me, a woman in a failed marriage. I want to build a life with you, he said simply. A real life, based on love and mutual respect. They'd call me a fallen woman, she whispered. We'd be outcasts. Only here, he countered. We could start fresh, somewhere people don't know us. California, Oregon, even back east if you wanted. The possibility of escape, of happiness, was so tantalizing that Beatrice could barely breathe. I need time to think. Samuel nodded, folding the land claim and returning it to his pocket. I understand. But Beatrice, I meant what I said. I love you, and I believe you deserve a life filled with joy, not obligation. They spent the afternoon together, talking of their childhoods, their dreams, the books they'd read, and the places they'd seen. With each passing hour, Beatrice felt herself drawn more deeply into the vision Samuel painted, a simple life built on love, a partnership of equals. As the sun began its descent, Beatrice reluctantly prepared to leave. I need to be back before dark. Samuel helped her mount her horse. When can I see you again? I don't know. Thomas has been watching me more closely since the celebration. The Founders' Day picnic is next Saturday, Samuel suggested. Everyone will be there. We could find a moment to talk. Beatrice nodded. I'll try. As she turned to leave, Samuel caught her hand. Beatrice, whatever you decide, know that my feelings won't change. I'll wait for you. The week that followed was the longest of Beatrice's life. She went through the motions of her daily routine, overseeing the household, attending to her garden, accompanying Thomas to Sunday services, all while her mind was consumed with thoughts of Samuel and the choice before her. The morning of the Founders' Day picnic dawned clear and warm. Beatrice dressed with care, packing the apple pie she'd baked for the community dessert table. Thomas was in an unusually good mood, having closed a deal to purchase the Henderson property adjacent to their eastern boundary. I'm thinking of running for territorial council next year, he announced as they drove to town. It's time Rollins Ranch had proper political influence to match its economic standing. That sounds like a significant undertaking, Beatrice replied, wondering if his political ambitions would make her decision easier or more difficult. It will require certain changes, Thomas continued. More entertaining, more visibility in Helena. And of course, an heir would strengthen my position considerably. Beatrice froze, his meaning unmistakable. In 3 months of marriage, Thomas had visited her bedroom only twice, both times performing his husbandly duties with clinical detachment. The thought of bearing his child filled her with dread. "I see," was all she could manage to say. The picnic grounds were already crowded when they arrived. Beatrice delivered her pie to the dessert table, then joined the circle of ranchers' wives while Thomas conferred with the men about cattle prices and water rights. Her eyes scanned the crowd for Samuel, finally spotting him helping to set up the horseshoe pitch with several other ranch hands. He looked up at that moment, their gazes locking across the distance. The connection was so palpable that Beatrice quickly looked away, afraid others might notice. The afternoon progressed with speeches, games, and abundant food. Beatrice found it increasingly difficult to maintain her composure, knowing that Samuel was nearby, waiting for some sign from her. When the opportunity finally came, it was almost accidental. Beatrice had gone to fetch water from the pump behind the schoolhouse, momentarily escaping the relentless socializing. As she filled her cup, she heard footsteps and turned to find Samuel approaching. "We shouldn't be seen together," she said, though she made no move to leave. "I know," he replied, "but I couldn't wait any longer." "Have you decided?" Beatrice took a deep breath. "Thomas wants an heir? He told me today." Samuel's expression darkened. "All the more reason to leave now, before." "Yes," she interrupted. "Yes, I'll go with you." The word hung between them, momentous and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "Are you certain?" Samuel asked, his voice thick with emotion. "No," Beatrice admitted with a small laugh. "I'm terrified, but staying terrifies me more." Samuel reached for her hand, squeezing it briefly. "When Thomas is going to Helena on business next week. He'll be gone 3 days. Tuesday," Samuel said decisively. "I'll come for you at sundown. Pack only what you can carry on horseback." "Where will we go?" "North first, to my land claim. Then wherever you want." He smiled. "I hear California's nice this time of year." A voice called Beatrice's name from the direction of the picnic grounds. "I have to go," she whispered. "Tuesday," Samuel repeated. "I'll be there." For the next 3 days, Beatrice moved through her life in a dreamlike state, making preparations in small, unobtrusive ways. She sewed a hidden pocket into her riding skirt to hold the money she'd saved from her household allowance. She carefully selected which few possessions she could bear to leave behind, and which were essential to take: her mother's locket, her father's pocket watch, a small book of poetry Samuel had given her. On Monday morning, Thomas departed for Helena, promising to return Thursday at the latest. Beatrice stood on the porch and waved goodbye, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief. That night, she could barely sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. By Tuesday afternoon, her small bundle was packed and hidden in the stable. She dismissed the housekeeper early, claiming a headache, and waited for sunset with mounting anxiety. As the light began to fade, Beatrice changed into her riding clothes and retrieved her bundle. She was in the stable saddling her mare when she heard hoofbeats approaching, too many for it to be just Samuel. Heart pounding, she peered through the stable door to see Thomas dismounting in front of the house, accompanied by his foreman and 2 other ranch hands. He had returned a full 2 days early. Beatrice frantically unsaddled her horse and hid her bundle in the hay, then smoothed her hair and walked out to greet her husband. "Thomas, this is unexpected. I thought you'd be in Helena until Thursday." Thomas's expression was grim. "Business concluded early. We rode hard to get back." Something in his tone sent a chill down Beatrice's spine. "Is everything all right?" "That depends," he said coldly, "on whether my wife is planning to abandon her marriage vows and run off with a cowhand." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Thomas snapped. "Mrs. Wilson overheard you at the picnic. Did you think people wouldn't notice? That they wouldn't talk?" Before Beatrice could respond, more hoofbeats sounded on the road. Samuel appeared, reining copper to a halt when he saw the assembled men. "You're early, Archer," Thomas called out, his voice dangerous. "We weren't expecting you until sundown." Samuel dismounted slowly, his eyes finding Beatrice's for a brief moment before focusing on Thomas. Mr. Rollins, I see there's been a change of plans. Indeed. Thomas gestured to his men, who spread out, effectively surrounding Samuel. I don't take kindly to men who try to steal what's mine, Archer. Beatrice isn't property to be stolen, Samuel replied evenly. She's a woman with her own mind and heart. She's my wife, Thomas countered. And you're trespassing on my land. Beatrice stepped forward. Thomas, please. This doesn't need to turn ugly. Stay out of this, Beatrice. Thomas didn't even look at her as he addressed Samuel again. You have two choices, Archer. Ride out of here now and never come back, or my men will ensure you regret it. The tension in the air was palpable. Beatrice could see the calculation in Samuel's eyes as he assessed the 4 men arrayed against him. She knew he was carrying a sidearm, as most men did in the territory, but he made no move toward it. I'll go, Samuel said finally, but not without hearing from Beatrice herself. All eyes turned to her, and Beatrice felt the weight of the moment crushing down on her. If she chose Samuel now, there would be violence and possibly worse. If she denied him, he would leave, and her chance at happiness would go with him. Samuel, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't go with you. The hurt that flashed across his face was like a knife to her heart. You don't mean that, he said. I do. She forced herself to continue. Please, just go. There's nothing for you here. For a long moment, Samuel stared at her, searching her face for the truth. Then, with deliberate movements, he remounted Copper. If that's what you truly want, Beatrice. It is, she lied, her hands clenched so tightly that her nails cut into her palms. Samuel nodded once, his expression now carefully blank. Goodbye, then. He turned his horse and rode away without looking back. That night, after Thomas had berated her for hours about loyalty and duty and the sanctity of marriage, Beatrice lay in her bed and wept silently. She had chosen safety over love, security over happiness, and the weight of that choice felt like it would suffocate her. The next morning, Beatrice rose early and went about her chores mechanically. Thomas was coldly civil, watching her constantly, as if expecting her to bolt at any moment. By mid-afternoon, she felt like she might shatter under the strain. When the sound of multiple riders approaching broke the tense silence, Beatrice looked up from her mending with a sense of foreboding. Thomas strode to the window, his expression darkening. Stay inside, he ordered, grabbing his shotgun from above the fireplace before heading out to the porch. Beatrice disobeyed, following him to the door in time to see Sheriff Miller and 2 deputies riding up, with Samuel between them, his hands bound. Rollins, the sheriff called out as they dismounted. Got a situation here I thought you should be aware of. What's he done? Thomas asked, gesturing towards Samuel with his shotgun. Caught him at the land office in Helena, trying to register a claim with a forged signature, Sheriff Miller explained. The claim was for a parcel up north registered in both his name and your wife's. Beatrice gasped, drawing all eyes to her. That's impossible. I never signed anything. That's what I figured, the sheriff said. But I wanted to confirm it before we process him for forgery. That's a serious offense in the territory. Samuel met Beatrice's bewildered gaze, his expression unreadable. May I speak with Mrs. Rollins? Privately. Absolutely not, Thomas snapped. Actually, Sheriff Miller interjected. It might be best to get this sorted. Mrs. Rollins has the right to hear what he has to say, especially if her name was used falsely. After a moment of tense silence, Thomas grudgingly nodded. Fine. But you stay with them, Sheriff, and keep him restrained. The sheriff led Samuel to the porch swing while Thomas retreated a short distance, still gripping his shotgun. Sheriff Miller positioned himself a few feet away, close enough to hear, but giving them a semblance of privacy. What have you done, Samuel? Beatrice whispered as she sat beside him. What I had to do, he replied quietly. I couldn't leave you here, Beatrice. Not after seeing the fear in your eyes yesterday. But forgery? You'll go to prison. Samuel leaned closer, his voice dropping even lower. Look in my breast pocket. Carefully, so they don't see. Confused, Beatrice reached into his pocket, her fingers closing around a folded document. She withdrew it slightly, enough to read the top line, Bill of Sale. What is this? She whispered. The deed to 40 acres on the North Ridge, Samuel explained softly. I bought it from Henderson last week, before Rollins acquired the rest of his property. It's yours, Beatrice. Free and clear. Beatrice stared at him in shock. How? What? Because they married you for land, he said, his eyes intense. But I want to build you a home of your own. A place that belongs to you and no one else. A place where you can be free. Tears filled Beatrice's eyes. Samuel, you can't possibly think this will work. They're going to take you away. A slight smile curved his lips. Read the rest of the document. Beatrice unfolded the paper further, scanning the legal language until she found the relevant section. Her heart nearly stopped as she understood. The land was indeed registered in her name alone as Beatrice Ellington, her maiden name, and the seller was listed as Morgan, not Henderson. There was no forgery, she breathed. You used my maiden name. And Morgan agreed to be listed as the seller to keep Rollins from discovering it. The land office clerk is his cousin. Samuel's eyes held hers. No one can take it from you, Beatrice. Not even your husband. By territorial law, property acquired by a woman in her maiden name remains hers exclusively, even in marriage. The implications were staggering. Beatrice had never owned anything outright in her life, not even the clothes on her back. The thought of having land that was truly hers, that no one could claim or control. Sheriff, she called suddenly, standing up. There's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Archer has committed no crime. Sheriff Miller approached. Is that so, madam? Yes. Beatrice held out the document. This land was purchased legally, in my maiden name Beatrice Ellington. I authorized Mr. Archer to register it on my behalf. The sheriff examined the document carefully, then looked from Beatrice to Samuel and back again. This appears to be in order, Mrs. Rollins. But it does raise some questions, such as why my wife owns property I know nothing about. Thomas had moved closer, his face flushed with anger. That would be one question, yes, the sheriff agreed mildly. Beatrice straightened her shoulders. It was an inheritance from my father, set aside in trust until recently. The lie came easily, born of desperation. Mr. Archer merely helped me complete the necessary paperwork, as a favor. Thomas's eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe that? Whether you believe it or not, Mr. Rollins, the document appears legitimate, the sheriff said, which means there's no forgery charge to pursue. He began untying Samuel's bindings. This is outrageous. Thomas exploded. He was clearly planning to abscond with my wife. Do you have evidence of that, sir? The sheriff asked calmly. He was here yesterday, ready to take her away. Is that true, Mrs. Rollins? Sheriff Miller turned to Beatrice. She met his gaze steadily. Mr. Archer came to deliver the final papers for my property. Nothing more. The sheriff seemed to consider this for a moment, then nodded. Well, without evidence of any crime, I have no reason to hold Mr. Archer. He finished removing the rope from Samuel's wrists. You're free to go, son. Thomas stepped forward menacingly. This isn't over, Archer. Not by a long shot. Actually, Mr. Rollins, the sheriff interjected, I suggest you let it be over. Making unfounded accusations can lead to all sorts of complications. Slander suits, for instance. The warning in his tone was unmistakable. After a tense moment, Thomas lowered his shotgun. Get off my property, Archer, and don't come back. Samuel looked at Beatrice one last time, his eyes conveying what he couldn't say aloud. Thank you for clearing up the misunderstanding, Mrs. Rollins. I wish you well with your property. As Samuel rode away with the sheriff and deputies, Beatrice clutched the deed to her land like a talisman. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was a beginning. A place of her own. Thomas was coldly furious for days afterward. He made inquiries about the parcel of land, only to be told by his lawyers that he had no legal claim to it. The property was indeed Beatrice's alone under territorial law. What do you intend to do with it? He demanded one evening over dinner. 40 acres is too small for ranching, too remote for farming. I haven't decided, Beatrice replied, a new confidence in her voice. Perhaps I'll build a cabin there. A place to go when I need solitude. Thomas scoffed. A woman alone in a cabin in the wilderness? Don't be absurd. It's my land, she said simply. My choice. 2 weeks passed with increasing tension in the Rollins household. Thomas began spending more time away, either in town or on the far reaches of his property. Beatrice took advantage of his absences to ride out to her 40 acres, exploring the boundaries, imagining possibilities. The land was beautiful, a mix of meadow and forest, with a small creek running through it and views of the mountains to the west. On her third visit, Beatrice discovered someone had been there. A small cairn of stones had been erected near the creek, and atop it lay a carved wooden eagle, unmistakably Samuel's handiwork. She smiled, understanding the message. He was watching over her, giving her time to find her way. On a warm afternoon in late July, Beatrice returned from town to find an unfamiliar buggy outside the house. Entering cautiously, she found Thomas in the parlor with a distinguished-looking gentleman in an expensive suit. "Ah, Beatrice," Thomas said with forced joviality. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Harrington from the Territorial Bank. He's here to discuss a matter of business." "Mrs. Rollins," the banker acknowledged with a slight bow. "I was just explaining to your husband the terms of our new investment opportunity." "Investment?" Beatrice echoed, taking a seat. "Yes, a rather substantial one," Thomas said. "The railroad is looking to extend a spur line through the county, and they need investors. Mr. Harrington assures me the returns will be exceptional." Mr. Harrington nodded enthusiastically. 20% at minimum, likely more as development follows the tracks. "It sounds promising," Beatrice said cautiously, noting Thomas's unusual excitement. "More than promising, it's the opportunity of a lifetime," Thomas declared. "The minimum investment is substantial, but with our resources, we're well positioned to capitalize." Beatrice felt a chill of foreboding. "What resources exactly?" Thomas waved a dismissive hand. "The Henderson property will serve as collateral for part of it. We'll mortgage the north pasture for the remainder." "And my father's land?" Beatrice asked quietly. "The original Ellington property?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Thomas's face. "Well, yes. That too, of course. All Rollins holdings will be leveraged for this investment." "I see," Beatrice said, her mind racing. "And have the necessary documents been prepared?" Mr. Harrington patted his briefcase. "I have them right here, Mrs. Rollins. We'll need your signature alongside your husband's, as the Ellington parcel is part of your marriage settlement." "May I review them?" Beatrice asked, extending her hand. "Of course," the banker said, somewhat surprised as he handed over the papers. Beatrice read carefully, understanding for the first time the full extent of Thomas's financial situation. The railroad investment required far more capital than she had imagined, and Thomas was proposing to mortgage nearly everything they owned to raise it. "This seems quite risky," she observed, looking up. "What if the railroad changes its plans? Or if construction is delayed?" "That's not going to happen," Thomas said with a dismissive laugh. "I have assurances from the highest levels." "Even so," Beatrice persisted, "leveraging everything on a single venture seems unwise." Thomas's expression hardened. "I don't recall asking for your financial advice, Beatrice. Your role is to sign where indicated." Mr. Harrington shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps Mrs. Rollins would like some time to consider." "That won't be necessary," Thomas interrupted. "My wife trusts my judgment in business matters." "Don't you, Beatrice?" The moment stretched between them, a silent battle of wills. Beatrice thought of her 40 acres, of the wooden eagle, of Samuel's words. "A place that belongs to you and no one else." "I'm afraid I can't sign this," she said finally, setting down the papers. Thomas stared at her in disbelief. "What did you say?" "I said I can't sign," Beatrice repeated, her voice stronger. "It's too risky. If the investment fails, we'll lose everything including my father's land." "This is ridiculous," Thomas snapped. "Mr. Harrington, would you excuse us for a moment? My wife and I need to have a private discussion." The banker rose hastily. "Of course. I'll wait on the porch." As soon as they were alone, Thomas rounded on Beatrice. "What do you think you're doing? This investment is critical to our future." "To your future, perhaps," Beatrice countered. "But I won't risk my father's legacy on a speculation." Thomas's face darkened. "You seem to have forgotten your place, Beatrice. A wife obeys her husband, and a husband protects his wife's interests," she replied. "Are you protecting mine, Thomas? Or using me for what I brought to this marriage?" His expression confirmed what she already knew. "I gave you security when you had nothing," he said coldly. "Everything you have is because of me." "Not everything," Beatrice said, thinking of her 40 acres. "And not anymore." That night, after a tense, silent dinner, Beatrice made her decision. She packed a small valise with essentials, wrote a brief note explaining that she was going to stay at her property for a few days to consider her position, and slipped out before dawn. The ride to her land took most of the morning. As she crested the final ridge, Beatrice was startled to see smoke rising from a clearing near the creek. Heart pounding, she urged her mare forward, coming to a halt at the edge of the trees. In the clearing stood a small cabin, rough-hewn but sturdy, with a stone chimney and a covered porch. And on the porch, whittling a piece of wood, sat Samuel. He looked up as she approached, his face breaking into a smile that made her heart skip. "You're earlier than I expected," he said, setting aside his work and standing. Beatrice dismounted slowly, taking in the cabin and the man before her. "You built this?" "Been working on it every day since I left Rollins Ranch," Samuel confirmed. "Morgan gave me the time. Said a man should follow his heart, even if his head says otherwise." Beatrice searched for words as she walked toward the cabin. "It's perfect. It's just a start," Samuel said. "One room for now, but there's space to add on. I figured you'd want to decide how you want it arranged." Beatrice stopped at the foot of the porch steps. "You built this for me, not knowing if I'd ever come." Samuel shrugged, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "I built it for us." "But yes, I knew it might be for nothing." He hesitated, then asked the question that hung between them. "Why are you here, Beatrice? Just visiting, or?" "Thomas wanted me to sign over my father's land for a risky investment. When I refused, he reminded me that a wife obeys her husband." Beatrice climbed the steps until she stood before him. "I decided I don't want to be his wife anymore." Hope dawned in Samuel's eyes. "That's a serious decision." "I've never been more certain of anything," Beatrice said. "They married me for land, Samuel. But you built me a home of my own." "I meant what I said that day," Samuel told her, taking her hands in his. "You deserve a place that's truly yours, a life filled with love instead of obligation." "And you?" Beatrice asked. "What do you deserve?" Samuel's smile was tender. "Just the chance to love you properly. To build a life with you as equals." "It won't be easy," Beatrice warned. "Thomas won't let me go without a fight. Divorce is scandalous, and even if I obtain one, society may never accept us." "Do you care what society thinks?" Samuel asked. "Because I don't. Not if it means having you by my side." Beatrice thought of the life she'd left behind, the hollow marriage, the isolation, the constant awareness of being valued only for what she brought to the Rollins empire. Then she looked at the cabin Samuel had built with his own hands, at the man who had risked everything to give her a choice. "No," she said finally. "I don't care what anyone thinks. Not anymore." Samuel pulled her into his arms then, and when their lips met, Beatrice knew she was finally home. The fight for her freedom was long and bitter. Thomas contested the divorce viciously, accusing her of adultery and abandonment. The scandal rocked the county, with society dividing along predictable lines, the wealthy and established supporting Thomas, while the working people largely sympathized with Beatrice and Samuel. Through it all, they remained on their 40 acres, improving the cabin, planting a garden, building a life together day by day. Samuel continued working for Morgan, saving every penny toward their future, while Beatrice took in sewing and began selling preserves from their garden to contribute to their income. 6 months after Beatrice left Rollins Ranch, Judge Patterson granted her divorce on the grounds of mental cruelty, a rare victory for a woman in the Montana Territory of 1879. The decree allowed her to reclaim her maiden name and confirmed her ownership of the 40 acres and her father's original property, which Thomas had been unable to mortgage without her signature. "It's over," Beatrice said in wonder as they rode home from the courthouse. "I'm free." "You've always been free in your heart," Samuel replied. "That's what I fell in love with first, your spirit." That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Samuel took her hand. "Beatrice Ellington, I have a question for you." "Yes," she said, though she knew what was coming. From his pocket, Samuel withdrew a simple gold band. "I've been carrying this since the day you arrived at our cabin. Will you marry me? Not for land or security or any reason except love." Tears of joy filled Beatrice's eyes. "Yes, Samuel Archer. I will marry you for love and only for love." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony on their land, with Morgan and his wife as witnesses and the mountains as their cathedral. Beatrice wore a dress of cream-colored muslin with wildflowers in her hair, and Samuel wore the only suit he owned, purchased especially for the occasion. "I promise to cherish your independence as much as I cherish your love," Samuel vowed. "This land is yours, this home is ours, and my heart is yours alone, for all the days of my life." "I promise to stand beside you as your equal," Beatrice replied. "To build our life together with love and respect, to remember always that true wealth lies not in land or gold, but in the love we share." As the years passed, their 40 acres flourished. Samuel's skill with horses and Beatrice's head for business proved a powerful combination. They added to their cabin, built a proper stable, planted an orchard. When Beatrice's father's land was combined with their original 40 acres and the adjacent parcel they purchased from Morgan, Archer Ranch became known for breeding some of the finest horses in the territory. Children came first, a son they named James, after Beatrice's father, then twin girls, Emma and Charlotte. The cabin expanded to a proper house with rooms for all, but they kept the original structure intact, a reminder of where they began. Thomas Rollins eventually remarried, a wealthy widow from Helena who brought even more land to his holdings. He and Beatrice maintained a distant civility when they encountered each other in town, though he never acknowledged Samuel or their children. On the 10th anniversary of the day Beatrice arrived at the cabin, Samuel surprised her with a special gift, an eagle's feather set in a glass case with a carving of 2 eagles soaring together. "Remember that first eagle's nest?" he asked as she admired it. "I told you eagles mate for life." "I remember," Beatrice said softly. "I didn't believe such devotion was possible then. And now?" Beatrice looked around at the home they'd built, at their children playing in the yard, at the life they'd created together. "Now I know it's not just possible. It's the most natural thing in the world when you find the right heart to join with yours." Samuel kissed her then, with the same tenderness and passion that had sustained them through a decade of joys and challenges. "They married you for land," he whispered against her lips. "But I married you for love, and built me a home of my own," Beatrice finished, her heart full. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across Archer Ranch, Beatrice and Samuel sat on the porch of the home they'd built together, no longer just a shelter, but the physical embodiment of a promise kept, of a love that had defied convention and circumstance to flourish in the wild Montana territory. From that first wooden eagle to the thriving ranch that now supported 3 generations of archers, every acre, every timber, every moment was testament to a simple truth: that true wealth lies not in what one possesses, but in whom one loves and who loves in return.